good. How are you on this beautifully grey Monday?
Yeah, I know. It's somewhat different. No, I'm very well, thank you. I had a very restful weekend, had a nice catch up of some energy, and the weather was lovely as well. So it was all good. What about yourself?
Also, a lovely weekend. I took all of Saturday off. I did creep out into the office a little bit on Sunday. So I took a few hours extra off on Friday, which felt very liberating at the time, but did mean that there was a little bit of catch up to play with.
Yeah. Very good.
There's always a payoff. So I did creep in. And then until I watched Arsenal Spurs, being an Arsenal fan myself, until the last minute when Spurs scored a winner, I was having a perfectly fine Sunday. And then it all went downhill. And I thought I won't get that hour and a half back. That was a complete waste of time. So,
Was it 3-2?
No, it ended up as 2-1.
2-1.
Just an appalling game.
Oh, was it? Oh, bad luck. Oh dear.
I'm struggling a little bit watching football without a crowd, but hearing the crowd noises that they've downloaded from the EA game, which is brilliantly done. So if you turn away, it feels like there's a crowd, but there was this wonderful moment where there was a free kick that was taking place, and the crowd noise was just slightly out of sync.
Yeah.
So the crowd went, ooh, as though there'd been a big miss before the free kick had been taken.
Oh, really? Ah!
And then he messed the free kick up as well. So it was...
Oh, no, it's a double whammy.
It really was. So look, I've been thinking, and I was chatting today in a coaching session, and I thought maybe this is something we could touch on today, particularly because of the work you do with leaders.
Yeah.
The difference between inspiring our teams and motivating them. And it was led by a really interesting conversation with a coachee who was looking at, did they want to be motivated to move up to the next level when they weren't that inspired anymore by their job? They were talented at it, but not really passionate about it. Or would they be better served finding that thing that inspires them to want to get up every day? And I thought this was really interesting. We had this whole conversation around the difference between inspiring and motivation, that push or that pull. And I thought, now that's a conversation to have with Richard, to see what have you experienced maybe with your leaders when it comes to driving motivation or trying to inspire people to follow? Because there is a difference.
There is
a palpable difference.
Yeah, but it's fantastic, a fantastic story that you've just said. So tell me a little bit more about the story. What lay behind it?
So this individual's been in post, in their current post, for 2 years, and pretty much every 18 months to 2 years gets promoted. They've come to a point now where their next position is really a GM role, so kind of MD of a region. But because of COVID, the business itself is going through some changes. They need to look at their own value proposition. So there's not a clear path for this particular individual. They're going to need to create that path for them. And through the conversation, what transpired was essentially when they have their review with their manager, they're going to need to put some kind of business case together for this new role. And as a result, talk to stakeholders, build a map, get some socializing of the issue, get some early adopters. Yeah, you're already looking tired just thinking of it, right?
Oh, yeah, it's sort of the stuff you're going to do, yeah.
And yet, halfway through the conversation, she suddenly pivoted and said, but do I really have the energy to do that? As opposed to doing something for me. If I'm going to write a whole business plan, why don't I write a business plan for me? And I looked at her with a smile, right? Because I said, look, for someone who's run a business for 25 years, you're going to get no greater exponent of that
exactly.
than the person sitting opposite you.
Yeah.
But if I remain objective, let's talk about your passions and your talents and this difference between motivation, which requires for some almost a daily drive towards execution, towards achievement, action orientation. And that difference between being inspired, which for me anyway, is all about the natural feeling that makes me want to be involved in something.
Yeah.
So if I'm trying to inspire my people, it's so that I don't need to motivate them. They're inspired. It almost trumps motivation. Whereas motivation to me seems like something I have to do and move towards.
Yeah.
Inspired means I don't even consider motivation because I just am.
Yeah. You're inspired to move. There's an energy. It's a physical force. It's sort of tucked away deep inside that you sense it yourself. I sense it when I'm starting to feel inspired, where I get a tingle, or the hairs in the back of my neck stand up, or I just sort of lean into something. You can see it in people's faces when somebody is speaking and they're just all there, and they're getting really, emotional. Whereas sort of the, to be motivated is sort of action orientated, getting tasks done, more transactional, and yet still important, right? Still really important. And I think the two are linked. It's very different. Because I'm an action orientated person. I like to, come up with a list, and I look back at the end of the day when I've ticked things off that I've had to do, and there's some things on that list that I don't want to do, and I've learned how to tackle some of those. But it doesn't excite me, my list. It's important, right? So what you're talking about is about the difference about that story is such a. And how did you feel? Or what did you see when she was having this? I'm sort of jumping to conclusions that it was sort of virtual, so you could see the physical reaction, maybe.
I saw her face change.
There we go. Yeah.
There was a stirring in her.
Yeah.
And, even when you were saying, you like writing this, I like ticking things off. Psychologically, it's very pleasing. But motivation is about being motivated by the result.
Yeah, totally.
And inspiration pulls me, anyway, towards something. It stirs my heart, my mind, my spirit.
Yeah.
So when I'm inspired, I'm not thinking about the end state.
It's absolutely. I mean, you can go back. There's countless stories, but to illuminate on a sort of a big scale, Martin Luther King spoke for 22 minutes on those steps, and he said countless times, "I have a dream." Dreams around stories, and he excited and he stirred people inside, didn't he? I have a dream. That one day I can see a little black boy and a little white girl walking hand in hand down the street. And I can feel it inside, the hairs on the back of my thing, God, gee, I always feel, so really emotional. One thing he didn't say, he said, I don't have I have a checklist. He didn't say that. He said, I have a dream, and not a clear path of how to get there.
No, and he didn't say, I have a dream. Oh, do you know what? I won't bother.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's that thing, right? Because he didn't need external motivation for that dream to move forward. The purpose was enough to drive him, like to propel him every day. And we know it to be true because 50 years later, it still resonates for people. 60 years later, it resonates for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's countless stories, aren't there, about that, where, those breakthrough moments, you need to be inspired by something. When you're doing something that's big and different, that you're going to have problems. So the inspiration is the fuel to power you through those low moments, whereas motivation is just the plan of how you're going to get through those difficult moments.
Right. So if I don't have inspiration, I need to look for motivation to keep moving forward.
Yeah, sure.
And to your point, I'm sure when Kennedy stood up at the beginning of the 60s and said, by the end of the decade, we'll put a man on the moon, I'm sure he didn't have a clue how they were going to do that.
No.
But inspired 60 years worth of space exploration.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to this day, there isn't a little boy who grows up who doesn't imagine, at least for a moment, what it would be like to be an astronaut.
Yeah. So coming back to the reality, you know, I'm a manager or I'm a leader and I've got a team of 8 people, or I have an organization that's across continents and it's a number of thousands and it's complex. You know, where the great leaders go to begin with is they tap into what is the why, what is the reason why we really need to be doing this. You know, if you're in healthcare or pharmaceutical, it's around what's going to be the impact on patients if we do this. You know, if you're in you know, FMCG and retail, it's how are consumers going to feel by actually having their products and services delivered in this way? How is it going to impact their lives, and what's going to make a better thing? And I think, you know, it's that ability to have a picture in your mind, and then to be able to talk with conviction, authenticity, and a sort of a bravery that you don't need, that you share. You don't have all the answers.
No, because you have purpose. And I think with purpose,
super compelling for people. So whether it was setting off a day's mission, you know, or we're going to implement a new system over the next 2 months, or we're going through a period of change that is going to be, you know, challenging, having that sort of inspirational moment at the front, which doesn't, you know, the worst thing about doing an inspirational moment is when it doesn't come across as authentic or true. You know, it's sort of just, you know, really?
And I was chatting with my nephew yesterday. He's a 21-year-old conductor, composer, creative. And his purpose is to inspire hope through creativity. That's his desire. And he wants to bring people together, to paint, to make music, and to collaborate. And we were just talking about, he's doing an open air concert in a couple of weeks' time, bringing people back together again to play. And we were talking about how does he inspire, because he's often complained about the need to motivate the musicians to want to play, and conductors have a reputation of being, you know, demagogues with egos the size of, you know, Everest, which most do, who I've met, by the way. And I said to him, imagine if you were to, rather than bring them all together for a chat about the music, and get into your first rehearsal, what would happen if you invited them all to a Zoom call and shared what inspired you about this particular agenda of music you put together, and then get them to talk about how it would feel to be playing again after all this time, and literally tap into their inspiration about music before you sit down and do any rehearsals. And I could see he was off. He was off. And can I record the session and send it to you, and you could give me some feedback? I'm like, no, I don't need to give you feedback on it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Because no one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
I said, then be the change you want to be. And this concept, so it doesn't matter where you sit, because inspiration propels me to move forward.
Yeah.
And I might get tired, but if I have that higher purpose, I can dig really deep.
Yeah, totally. It's really interesting that we're having this conversation. It's sort of, I'm going to show you something now, and it's sort of like a bit of a setup, which hasn't been set up because this has not been planned. So for our one listener out there, this is not a setup.
We promise.
But I've got something here that somebody sent me this morning, and I just sort of a little teased you there.
Yeah.
And we've you will know, of course, around the comfort zone. You know, we live in this comfort zone most of our lives, and sometimes we need to get into the more uncomfortable place of stretch, which is learning and curiosity and uncertainty and this sort of thing. And I think there is a difference between, you know, the inspiring piece and the motivational, the motivation piece, because motivation is about a list. It is about a plan. It is about more thoughtfulness and rigor. And we need to understand what are we going to do and who's going to do what by when. And that is all really, we agree that's really important. The inspiring thing is something that's much far greater and richer and deeper, and yet we don't know those sorts of things. And therefore, it's quite scary. Yeah. And that is an area outside of our comfort zone. So for the best leaders, they can inspire almost intuitively. And they're out there. They're doing it all the time. And I just want I'm gonna hold this up so our listener can maybe see it. And it's called, I think it's called the 2% mindset. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, whether it's 2% or not, but what is it saying? It's saying most of the time we spend inside the circle in our comfort. In there, it's got sort of like, when I'm in there, I sometimes feel like I'm just getting by, I'm surviving. I'm playing it safe. I sort of maybe procrastinate a little bit, and I'll do enough to get by. On the outside, coming all the way back round to your wonderful conversation that you had earlier on, that you said, oh my goodness, all of a sudden her face lit up. It says excitement, it says abundance. It says they act in spite of fear, and they choose newness, and they feel confidently insecure, which I quite
like. I like that. I like that.
Going with your dreams. So I think as a manager or a leader, if you remember one of the things that we said last week, it was about choosing whether to go deep or go to light. And it's about choosing in a moment, do I want to be staying in the sort of the motivational space inside the circle, which is sort of like the important things, the important and good things to do, or is this a moment where I can actually inspire a movement? Is this a moment where I need to get outside of my comfort zone and do something more? And I really quite like that. And I thought, actually, I want to spend far more than 2% of my time outside of that circle.
Right.
So I've got to notice where's my opportunity to go out to do that.
And that requires you to be present and to have the right intention and the right focus and attention. I'm not sure every leader knows their purpose. I think a lot of people are promoted because they're technically very good at their jobs, and they find themselves in positions where they're leading teams, and they just carry on delivering against projects, against results that are passed down to them by their own leaders. And the ones that make a difference are the ones who do inspire.
Yeah.
Because they know how to tap into that vision, that purpose, that where we're going and why we're going there.
Yeah, and I went a bit like that on you there, because if you get promoted for doing a really good job of getting things done, that is fantastic, right? I mean, we have to do that. We can't always be inspiring all the time.
No, agreed.
So it's not one is better than the other. It's just different. And I think there's the opportunity for those people who maybe are missing the opportunity of being inspiring. And we miss it for a number of reasons. We might miss it because we think, actually, I can't do that. Or it's not my role to do that. Or I believe everybody can be inspiring. But you have to choose to be inspiring and to be brave. So there are people out there who, our listener will know, because they would have met them. These who we call naturally inspirational. They walk in and they sort of talk more inspirationally. They're more of a sort of a magnet. They're sort of they people love to be in their sort of shine. And I think they've trained themselves to do that. So I think people can make a choice to actually be doing more of this more often, and to be brave and jump into it.
I know you're right, because I also think there are different layers when it comes to inspiration. Some people are inspiring because of who they are and what they've achieved. Yeah. Actually, to listen to, they may not touch and tap into all of your idiosyncrasies. I remember 10 years ago plus, we were doing a lot of work with professional sports at the time. Yeah. And we were invited by the FA for England, Switzerland at Wembley. I took a couple of clients with, and we had some hospitality in a great big giant room afterwards. 5 stages around the room, ex-pros on the stage with a journo, having discussions mic'd up, and you couldn't hear them from bit to bit. So it was very nicely done. And then all of a sudden, there was this hush in the room. And I turned round, as did everybody else, and David Beckham had walked in.
Yeah.
Now, here was a guy who, with all the best will in the world, admitted he had a limiting talent, but took it as far as he could possibly go, which happened to be England captain 100 plus times.
Yeah.
Which ain't bad, by the way.
Yeah.
But when he started out, of course, people would mock his voice. He needed vocal coaching. Richard, I observed hundreds of men and women clambering to be by his side.
Yeah.
Men wanting to be like him.
Yeah.
Women just wanting to be next to him.
Yeah.
And he didn't even need to speak.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I remember when, one of my siblings at university got the opportunity to listen to Mandela talk when he came out of prison. And he said that with 3,000 people in the audience, not only did everybody from the university come, but nobody spoke. Everyone hung on every single momentary pause.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of inspiration. That's in the Martin Luther King layer of inspiration.
Yeah. And so we love those stories, and yet I'm never going to captain England, and I'm never going to be like, I'm never going to have that experience that Mandela did. But the stories that really come to my mind would be, the 18-year-old schoolgirl who decides to go and volunteer at a refugee camp, and builds a real movement around that refugee camp with the 12 other friends that she's doing it with, and becomes a sort of a natural leader, or whether it is the scout leader, or whether it is a community person who just sets up and does something. We had this, and we live in this lovely village, COVID hit, and it took one person to just sort of say, hold on, how can we band together in this wonderful village of 2,500 people? There's got to be some vulnerable people here. Are they going to be okay during this time? I don't know how we're going to do this, but surely we need to do something. And actually, without any sort of plan, somehow galvanized a small group of 5 or 6 people, and all of a sudden, the Facebook page, and we've seen that story hundreds of times. But that person, I never knew in the village before. I've been born and bred in this village. I pride myself on knowing everybody, but clearly I don't. Didn't know that person. And it was sort of a person that just came at. So we have the, David Beckhams, we have the Nelson Mandelas, we have those wonderful stories that people like us like to talk about in business because everybody knows who we're talking about. But actually the real ones that really inspire me are the people who nobody know about, who are doing these inspiring things because they just choose, and this is the thing, they choose to do something.
It's making that choice.
Yeah, and it's making that choice, and it's getting outside that comfort zone, saying, I don't know how we're going to work this out, but it just sort of feels like I have to do so. I have to do something to, just to do something. And
I suppose you see it a little bit, don't you? Even with children, if you put 15 kids, you and your siblings all come together, and all the kids are in a room, a range of ages,
yeah,
3 to 12.
yeah,
It's not always the oldest or the loudest who is nominated as a leader, because they're not looking at their business card or their email signature.
yeah.
They appoint their own leader, and they appoint the leader that inspires a new game or a new form of play or an idea that everyone goes, let's do that.
Yeah.
And it's that same principle, which to your point means that all of us can, if we make that choice, look to inspire others, but it requires a commitment to that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this topic that you've brought, the difference between inspiration and motivation, both of which are important. The inspiration talks about a bigger thing with a sort of a not sure about how we're going to do, but a real conviction, authenticity and passion to go and do something that's great and big. And motivation is something that everybody can tap into, because it's more of the transactional things that we need to go through in the day-to-day. So both are important. But the thing that's really sort of resonating with me and the insight is we choose when to do which. And actually what we're sort of highlighting is choose to be inspiring more often. Go for it, choose it, and then watch, see what happens. And I love it. You know, I love the topic.
Maybe it's about having that courage, Richard, to speak up and share that passion, that idea with others, and see.
Yeah.
Some people don't even have the courage maybe to speak up. So if there are people listening who are thinking, well, I don't feel like I'm very inspiring, to your point, no, everyone is.
Yeah.
Just speak up, step outside that circle.
Yeah.
And live in the 2% world for a moment.
Yeah.
And you might be surprised at who you can move.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is you just talking, the things that I totally agree with, is you need to believe it yourself. You need to not believe that you know how we're going to do it. Actually believe that this is something that needs to be done, and actually you're prepared to do something about it or talk about it at the very least. I've got, like a small business, but we've got aspirations to grow threefold in 3 years. Big goal. And the purpose behind it, why I want to do that, is so that I can give away money, that I can create a butterfly fund to fund my wonderful colleagues and associates around the world to do things that they're passionate about, to give their time for free for organizations and individuals that can not otherwise afford them. So I am super inspired about it. And when I start talking about why I'm doing that, I can see people leaning in, particularly some of the stories that I'm sharing with them about what my team are doing with their time and the impact that they're having on people's lives. I see people leaning in. Now, how the hell am I going to run this butterfly fund? What the structure is, how are we going to make it clear, how are we going to talk about it, how are we going to market it, how are we going to get it out there, how do we make it more visible with clients so that they can partner with us to, sort of add to the butterfly? I've got no idea. All I do know is I feel super motivated inside me. It's really driving me with a real fire. And when I talk to people about it, actually I see them leaning in. So I know it's working. I can see it, very much like the conversation you had earlier on today, where it's a dawning realization, actually I could go and do this for myself.
Right.
And that is such a wonderful thing, to choose to be inspiring.
And you know what? I watched a movie this weekend, with the family called Patch Adams.
Right. Never heard
Robin Williams.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. It's going to be good.
He plays true story, he plays a doctor who in 1968 ends up in a psychiatric hospital because he tried to commit suicide. He puts himself in there, and he takes himself out when he realizes that the doctor doesn't even listen to him. But when he talks to the patients and he creates humor with them, he releases them from their moment. So he goes to medical school, and he's horrified by the fact that he doesn't get to work with patients until year 3. So he goes, completely bucks the trend, and he just goes in anyway because he finds himself at some meat packing convention by accident. He wins a white coat, and he kind of looks in the mirror and he says, "What's the difference between a meat packer and a doctor?"
Yeah.
So he wears his white coat, he gets one for his mate, and they go into the hospital, and they go into the cancer wards with the kids, and they make the kids laugh, and they start treating patients with humor. And when he's out in his 3rd year, and they're doing the tours with the doctor's saying, and here is, patient X, and this is what they've got. And his character says, "What's the patient's name?" And the doctor actually has to look down the list to find their name.
Yeah.
Since then, Dr. Patch Adams created the Gesundheit Foundation. And the Gesundheit Foundation offers completely for free, without insurance or cover, medical help for anyone who needs it. And every single medic globally gives their time for free to come and administer Patch's way of helping people, which is to treat the patient as a name, to bring humor into their life, and to not worry about whether or not you cure the disease, but whether or not you treat the human being.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think now that kind of we've talked and you shared your story of what drives you now with your butterfly fund, it's that same principle. It's to do something good. That purpose drives you, and you see others lean in, I think, with the phrase.
No. Cool. Oh, wow. So Patch Adams, Robin Williams, you're giving it to me. You're adding value all the way.
Download it and watch it on Sky.
Oh, wow.
Other streaming services are available, obviously.
I most certainly will. Thank you very much. It's been another good little chit chat.
I think we've come full circle once again. I love it.
I think we have.
So we're going to be taking a couple of weeks off now, I think. You're taking some time out. I'm taking some time out at the end of July. So I think it might be 3 weeks before we bang our heads together over a virtual screen again, Richard. That's
right. I mean, I'm away for the first 2 weeks in August, so it might be a little bit longer than that. But look forward to our next missives.
Enjoy working the Highlands, and I will see you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you very much indeed. Great.
Brilliant, Richard. That was fun.
Brad.